Oh my, where's Brooke? I wore this mask today. If you maybe you can zoom in close. This is a mask that
David.
Brooke made. Oh, I hear her, Brooke. See that? It's tie-dyed. It's really awesome. But where is Brooke? I heard her voice just a second ago.
David.
Well, hi, Brooke. Where are you? Brooke? Where is Brooke? This is kind of like, where's Waldo? I hear her, but I do not see her. I'm looking in the pews. I'm looking around the sanctuary. I do not see Brooke.
David.
Yeah, that's my name. It sounds like Brooke. Do you hear that, kids? It sounds like Brooke saying my name. She said, David. Where is she? Where's Waldo? No. Where's Brooke?
David.
She's not there. Oh, there's a hand right by that. Maybe that's Brooke. No, okay. He moved away from that. That was on the soundboard. Oh,
David.
There's me right on the screen. I heard her again. Brooke, where are you? Is there some magic word I'm supposed to say?
I'm right here.
Yeah, right here where? Right here where? Oh, my kids, do you know where Brooke is? She's not. Oh, she could be hiding under the pews. My goodness, you can't even see through there. You can see.
I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. I see you.
Hey.
You were hiding in the church.
I was hiding. When the youth, we were all around the church, used to love to hide in the church.
Yeah, and we only had one rule, though. Couldn't hide in the sanctuary.
Couldn't hide in here,
Yeah,
no.
because this was a special place where we come to worship, but we could pass through.
Yeah.
Remember when we played sardines? That's kind of like
I know.
reverse hide and go seek. So,
It would be scary, though, sometimes to play.
oh yeah, there's some places in this church that are really dark.
Yeah.
At nighttime. I mean, we'd play it at night when we had lock-ins and
Yes.
sleepovers. That
But
was
it'd be real quiet, and you would hear the creaks of the church. There's a lot of creaks in this church.
Yes, there are, especially in the winter when it's heating season. But in some places in the church are more dark than others.
Yes.
And but the sanctuary is not too dark because of the street lights that come
Yeah.
in and all the stained glass windows. But we could pass through here. But there's different secret passageways and lots of fun places to hide in the church. But yeah, it just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Kids, do you like to play games like that? Do you like to hide? Hide and go seek? We used to play that in the summer.
Well, kind of like in the summer in the swimming pool. You know how to play Marco Polo?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Marco.
Polo.
Yeah, and then you'd have to find the person.
Marco. Now, are you like blindfolded or anything?
Well, you're closing your eyes,
Okay.
so you're trusting
Then
somebody's keeping their eyes closed to
So
find
you have
somebody.
to kind of go to where the sound is.
Yes.
They are remembering how dark it is in building.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's some places that are really dark.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
there
say it out
are.
loud in case we play sardines sometime in the future. I don't want to give my favorite hiding places away.
So sometimes it's when that happens, when we were in the church and you hear something or you think you hear something, like
Well, yeah. It's
like you kind of heard, you didn't know where I was, but I was calling your name.
Yeah. And yeah, so it makes you wonder what's going on. Okay, I hear somebody, I hear my name. What am I supposed to do? Who's calling me? Yeah.
And then sometimes I second guess myself. Did I really hear somebody call my name? Or did I really hear that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it reminds me of a story in the Bible.
Which story is that?
Well, there was a young boy named Samuel. And, well, his mother's name is the same as my daughter, Hannah.
Oh.
And see, the story starts with his mother. Before we even got to the story that we're going to talk about today, she was in the temple. It's kind of like in the church, except it was the central place where all of the people would go to worship. at different times in the Jewish faith. And so she went to the temple to pray because she didn't have children. She wanted desperately to have children. And so she prayed to God, and she promised God that she would give any child, back to God in devotion. And God blessed her with a child. And so she gave her child back. I mean, it wasn't like immediately. She raised the boy till he was maybe 5, 6, 7, 8. And then it was like he went off to boarding school. Some of our kids are familiar with that. And so he went to the temple with the priest to learn about how to be in the temple and to help out. He was going to learn the faith and religion of the people. And so he was with Eli, who was the priest at that time. And I don't know if they were in a separate, if there was living quarters attached. I don't know what it was like exactly. I don't know if we'd know, but they were in space that was kind of their living space. And Samuel had gone to bed for the night. Do you remember the story from Sunday school?
Well, kind of. He went to bed at night, and then he thought he heard his name being called.
Well, yeah, he did. His name was Samuel, so Samuel.
But he got up, and there was Eli told him just go back to bed, pretty much.
Well,
didn't he?
yeah, I mean, they did that quite a few times. I mean, Samuel heard his name. He gets up, and he's thinking, it's dark out. I'm not excited about this. But he goes and he finds his way to where Samuel was sleeping. And imagine Samuel's in a sleep, or Eli is sleeping. And, kids, you've done that before. Your parents are sleeping and you're trying to get their attention because you're thirsty in the middle of the night. You have to go to the bathroom. You're sick to your stomach. You just don't feel good. Or maybe you're just scared.
And I remember saying, just go back to sleep, because I was so tired.
Yeah.
Just go back to
As a
sleep.
parent.
As a parent, yeah.
Yeah,
just
and
go
so
back to
Eli
sleep.
is not exactly the parent, but he is kind of the caregiver for Samuel at this time. And he was just like, go back to bed, it's nothing. And that happens 3 or 4 times. Samuel hears his name.
But Eli finally got it after a couple times, right?
Yeah, well, I think we need to stop here and talk about Eli.
Okay.
Because Eli, he was a priest. So we're familiar here in the United States and around the world. There are still priests today, mostly in the Catholic tradition of the Christian faith, and also that's the name given to the pastors in the Episcopal Church as well, a priest. Priest or pastor. So we can kind of understand that Eli was kind of like a priest or a pastor. However, he was like the head honcho.
Oh.
He was the chief priest. He was the highest up. Maybe like the Pope or a bishop or something like that. But the problem was he had let his faith kind of go downhill. He was just kind of doing his job and going through the motions. He wasn't really listening for God. And in many ways, he wasn't really obeying God. He was letting his sons do things that were really bad as far as their religion and faith was concerned. And so Eli was not really in touch with God the way that he had been maybe at one time. That can happen. With adults and with us kids at any age, we can kind of lose touch with God.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's several people that have probably experienced that at some time in their lifetime.
Yeah, so Samuel is sleeping. It's in the middle of the night, and he comes, and Eli's like, go back to bed. Samuel hears his name, Samuel. He gets up, he goes, he looks around, and then he goes to Eli, are you calling me? Are you calling me? And Eli says, no. And this happens 3, maybe 4 times. And finally, and it might have been the fog of sleepiness, but I think it was more his spiritual fog. Eli, the chief priest, finally comes to his senses that maybe God is the one that is calling out Samuel's name. And he finally says to Samuel, when you hear that voice again calling your name, this is what you need to say.
And what's that? I don't remember that part.
Yeah. Eli told Samuel, the little boy, to say to that voice, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." So basically, Eli said, it's God talking to you. And so when you hear that again, Samuel, say, "God, I'm listening. Start talking."
I hope that was a reminder for Eli, too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's why I'm thinking that it took him that long to realize. I mean, he was that deep, not in a physical sleep, although I think that was probably the first and second time. But by the third time, he's kind of getting aroused out of his spiritual sleep to get awake because God is trying to talk to us. We're in the temple, and God was calling Samuel.
And Samuel was a boy.
Yes, he was just a boy, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 at the most, but he was a young boy. We'd have to get the Bible and read the story to see if it tells us the age, but I don't think it does.
I don't remember the age either in there.
But I heard this story in Sunday school a long time ago. And kids, believe it or not, God speaks to you. God still speaks to you. God might speak to you about something that's right versus something that's wrong. God might, there's different ways that we can hear God speaking to us and calling us to do things. And God does that for kids.
And sometimes God speaks to us through other people.
Well, right, yeah. I mean,
Or
because
in ways that we don't expect.
well, in this case, Eli was helping Samuel to know that it was God that was trying to reach out to him.
Right.
Now, when I was 14, so that's older than what the boy Samuel was, but I wasn't. I mean, in the scope of life, I was young,
Right.
and I remember hearing, not audibly, it wasn't like somebody said, "David, David," like you did this morning, but I remember sensing being called of God to be a pastor. Actually, it wasn't at that point, I didn't think of it in terms of church ministry in a local church, but I was feeling called to ministry, maybe missions, whatever. But I was 14.
I'm trying to think of a time I can't remember a time that I'm sure there was, but I just can't think of a time when that happened to me so young. I can think of times in my adult life where I've actually heard a voice inside somewhere saying something to me, but I'm trying to think of a kid or...
Well, sometimes it's not necessarily like a call to ministry or service, like I said, and maybe what was God was calling Samuel to, but sometimes it's a call to do the right thing. Maybe we know somebody that is cheating or stealing, and it's hard to point that out, or they're doing something that's not appropriate. And to point that out, there can be a cost.
Well, I can remember times growing up in church, and my parents were really, really active with the youth group. And my sisters were 7 and 8 years older, so I had to go everywhere with them, And anyway, I would always ask, "Why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Why do we have to do that?" And the answer I kept getting was, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's the right thing to do.
And so I didn't understand that back then as a child, but I understand that as an adult when I look back in my life.
Yeah, and that's where the adults, parents that are listening today, we're like Eli. We have to be aware of the ways that God could be speaking to our children, drawing them into their faith, in their faith life. And so we as parents need to be also listening for the voice of God in the ways that God calls us, maybe not just to service or ministry, but to live and do the right thing, to make right choices. And so parents, you have an important role because you're like Eli in this story. You're the ones that are there with your children. Sometimes it's a word of comfort to your kids. Sometimes it's a word of instruction, of teaching. Sometimes it's a word of encouragement that, this is God talking to you. This is God speaking in your heart and in your mind to do the right thing. So, yeah, it's a really cool story. I remember it from when I was this high. It sounds like we have some thoughts here. Here comes. Oh, okay. 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 Oh, this happened to me when I felt God pulling me to open the conversation, with Eric to foster or to adopt. God knows the plan he has for us, even when we struggle to see or feel that the path is for us. God never gives up on us in his plans for us. That is so true. So absolutely true that, so it's really neat, parents, and your testimony, the words you share with your kids are going to be important about your own faith journey, how you listen for God, and when you hear God speaking. In fact, thank you for bringing that up, Lee. I had a text message yesterday. I'm not going to identify the person or the family, but there was a family in our church, an active family, where a member of the family was struggling about something and didn't share it with the family, and then finally felt God speaking to share that with the family. And so that in that way, when we kind of share those stories, that's how we help our children and our families grow in faith in God. God is still speaking. We say that. And this is one of those stories where we would say that what God did back then, talking to Samuel, God still does today. And it's not, at that point, God was not talking to the priest, to the pastor.
Right.
God was talking to the little boy. That's pretty awesome.
That is.
That our God chooses all of us. God is not just concerned about priests and pastors as the ones that God talks to.
Well, one of the things that you said about, that what he was supposed to say, speak to me, Lord, because I am listening. Sometimes it's hard to listen. And I think sometimes God speaks to all of us, younger, older, and we're not listening for a lot of different reasons.
That reminds me of something, Brooke.
Uh-oh.
No, it's not an uh-oh. Every Sunday when we do the scriptures, sometimes with the Hebrew scripture lesson, we'll say, the reader will say, God is still speaking, and then the people will respond, are we listening? And then some Sundays with the gospel lesson, we'll say, God is still speaking, and then what do we say? Spread the word or spread the news. Yeah, so...
And that should be, to all of us, a reminder to listen.
Yeah, and
because sometimes it's just remote hearing things or whatever, and that's a conscious thing. Are we really listening to what was just said?
Yeah, and so the ways that we can hear God speak can be maybe through a dream, through a vision, through our own thoughts and minds and heart, but sometimes the way we hear God speak is through the Bible stories. That reminds us, like today, we could hear God reminding all of us that God still calls children and youth into God's service. God still speaks to children and youth about righteousness, good living, good choices, and all of that. And sometimes we as adults have to then help our kids know, yes, that is the voice of God. Just like Eli helped Samuel to know that is God. So
we have to teach them to know that.
That's right. It's really important. Yeah, listening. Wow. Listening for God's voice. That's really important. And That's what we're all about in our church.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And God is talking to us all the time. Sometimes God speaks to us in the beauty of the rainbow. This summer, I was so aware of rainbows. Kids, do you like
Oh,
rainbows?
there were so many this summer, I
It seemed
thought.
like there were more than before. And I'm out there with my cell phone taking pictures and really, and I saw more double rainbows than I think I've ever seen them. I mean, I used to see a part one. I saw one that went from the whole edge to the whole edge, right out. I was out behind the church. It was the way the storm passed by and the way the sun hit the clouds. I have a picture of a full double rainbow. There's a different term for that, but that was the first time I'd ever seen it from horizon
whole
to
thing.
horizon.
Yeah,
it was
that's
awesome.
cool.
It was really cool. But God can speak to us in that. I mean, it's not just a reminder of like the story of the flood and then when Noah promised that God would never destroy the earth through a flood again. It's more than that. It's the power and the majesty and the beauty of God's creation that was talking to me.
And then when I experience something like that, something that just is like, that's God, this is what pops into my mind. So, be still and know that I am God.
Okay, so sometimes we have to be still. We're always so busy.
Yeah, like take that. It's almost like the time to take a deep breath and experience God.
That's important because, as Americans, of course, this year with the pandemic, we've actually slowed down. And that may be some of the reason why we as people are uncomfortable, is not just because we can't go out to dinner or when we go to the grocery store, we're worried about a virus, but sometimes it's just the pace of life has slowed down, and we're not used to that because we're always busy rushing from here to there to there. But when we slow down, sometimes we can hear God speak. We can become aware of God's presence, whether it's in the rainbow or in those silent moments. So, kids, how have you heard God speak? How have you heard God speak? Maybe some of our kids will respond. How you have heard God talk to you. And maybe where or when. What was the circumstances? Yeah. How or when have you heard God speak to you? Think about that.
I'll share when I hear God speak. It's like I'm in the right frame of mind, and that's when I'm walking.
Okay.
Because mostly I'm by myself. I walk early in the morning, so it's peaceful. There's not a lot of distractions.
Okay.
And it just is like sets the stage for me to be open to hearing God.
Very, very good. Yeah. So walking, maybe early in the morning.
And I've said this before, and people think I'm crazy, but when I'm rinsing out my tie-dye.
Okay. Well.
Also. It's something about that water that's very soothing, and I don't know.
Well, but you've also talked about it because sometimes, like, the dye in our life can be some things that are good. Some things that happen to us from the outside can color us in certain ways, but then sometimes it can stain us in a bad way, and we have to rinse that out, that extra bad stuff.
Yep, when I'm rinsing out tie-dye.
Yeah. So
Weird, but it is. It's true.
Well, but see, for me, that's gardening. When I'm outside,
True.
and it's not just gardening. Sometimes it's just being out. Because I will tell you, and this is a recent thing. It's in the last few years, I have been noticing that songbirds that used to, I think, go further south are overwintering here. Okay, you've got some kids' response when or where or how they've heard God speak.
So Kylie says that she sees God in nature like the bluebirds she saw yesterday.
Ooh,
Wow.
that's a good example.
Bluebirds, they are so pretty.
And Chloe has heard God calling her name, but didn't know it was God till now. We sense God in the things we see in nature.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I heard cardinals today and have for the last several days. And yeah, these birds are, they didn't used to stay over the winter. Okay. So is this God speaking to me or is this the media? I don't know. But it makes me wonder, is global warming, is there climate change that is causing these patterns when it used to, there was not nearly as much bird activity in the winter like this month.
When after Christmas, when my kids were home, we went walking on a trail, and in one tree, we saw 4 cardinals. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, wow.
In one
Yeah, but
tree,
so God
at the same time.
still speaks, and I can believe that God can still speak in the ministry of St. John's. God can speak whether it's in a service of worship. Sometimes, like kids, I'm sure many of you have sensed that your parents have either been disgusted, fearful, angry, or upset over the last week and a half or so here in our country of events that are going on. And God can speak comfort to you and your parents. God can do that sometimes when we gather and worship, whether it's through the singing of a hymn or whether it's through the prayer. And it may not even be that that was specifically the topic, but God can still speak a word of comfort or peace or contentment to us, even while things around us are kind of in an uproar.
And thinking of my own life, sometimes God spoke or gave me the sense of comfort and peace through my children.
Ah, cool.
You know, that it was just like they gave me the hug when I needed a hug. Not that I have said anything, you know, but when thoughts were weighing heavy or whatever, and they just, you know, come up and hug you right at the same time or whatever.
Yeah. My granddaughter, who is listening, will say, "I love you, Papa." And that's really, and it's just kind of out of the blue, but it's really special. "I love you, Papa." And yeah, that can bring peace and restore us. And in some ways, I think, you know, God is in that too.
I do. I think so too.
But God is still calling people. God is calling us to do things. Sometimes God is calling people to give their whole life in ministry to God, whether it's as a pastor or as a chaplain or as a missionary or someone that teaches in a college or seminary, religion and Christianity. God is still calling those people. God is still calling people to consider leadership in the local church, to be involved as, in our church governing body is called the consistory. Some churches it's a church council, some it's called a governing board, but God is still calling people to serve in the leadership of the local church. God is still calling people to be involved with Vacation Bible School and with teaching ministries in the church. God is calling us, and God is speaking. The question is, are we listening? And so we have to keep asking ourselves, are we listening? And then if we are, and we hear God speaking, then what are we supposed to do? Spread the word, spread the news. And that's going to be kind of the topic in our service of worship today.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so.
Good.
Yeah, so kids, when you go to bed tonight, think about the story of Samuel and Eli. When you go to bed tonight, listen. And don't be afraid, because, see, it's not necessarily a monster under your bed. God is there already. By God's Spirit, God is surrounding you. And so, yeah.
God's like that warm blanket protecting you.
Yeah. So that's the story today. So
yeah, that was a good story to remember.
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about that story much.
Yeah, but boy, you had me going, Brooke, when you were hiding. I heard your voice, but I didn't know where you were. I knew it was you, Brooke. And sometimes, kids, you may you may know that God is speaking to you, and then you just have to say, "Speak, Lord, for I am listening." All right. Well, we should close with the Lord's
We
Prayer.
should close with the Lord's Prayer, absolutely.
All right. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. See you next week. Oh, no, not next week, because we
Oh,
have...
no, that's right.
We have
We
the
have
annual
annual
meeting.
meeting.
So we're sorry. We will take a break from Faith Formation, and we will pick up 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today, we'll have our Faith Formation again, and we'll dig into God's Word. Maybe there'll be something interesting next 2 weeks from today.
Okay.
I'm sure there will be.
Yeah, there will be.
So we'll see you. Maybe we'll see you in worship, hopefully.
All right, see ya.
Bye, kids. Bye, parents.